All right. Welcome to Inside the Realtor Studio, interview with industry leaders and professionals in real estate. This year, the Tucson Association of Realtors is turning 100, 1921 to 2021. We are honoring our history by conducting interviews with the past presidents of the Tucson Association of Realtors. We'll learn a bit of history by talking to the experts themselves. Today's past president from 1979 is J T Tsighis. James J T Tsighis, ABR, CRB, RCRMS, CRS, GRI, ePro, and Realtor Emeritus, loves serving the real estate industry and fellow realtors. Since his tenure as TAR president in 1979, he has chaired dozens of work groups, committees for the Tucson Association of Realtors, Arizona Association of Realtors, and National Association of Realtors in areas of risk management, government affairs, and strategic planning. Over the past 4 decades, he has served the realtor community extensively as a director for AAR and the NAR Board of Directors. Committed to helping others grow as a former designated broker for one of Tucson's largest brokerages, JT has been a long-standing RPAC major investor. He has had the honor and distinct privilege to serve as NAR's federal political coordinator to Congresswoman Gabrielle Giffords, Congressman Ron Barber, Congresswoman Ann Kirkpatrick, and in 2021 as FPC for Senator Mark Kelly. At present, he is an associate broker with Keller Williams Southern Arizona and currently shares his expertise with seasoned real estate professionals as a coach and mentor. Some of his notable awards and recognition as a leader include AAR and TAR Realtor of the Year in 1979, TAR Realtor of the Decade 1980 to 1990.
Good one, Steve.
Oops. You were the very first recipient. The AAR Arthur G. Grozier Distinguished Service Award in 2008, and TAR Outstanding Service Award winner in 2008 and 2014. NAR Risk Management Committees as chair, past chair, and member from 2007 through 2017. NAR Chair Risk Management License and Law Reform in 2016. And in 2021 will be inducted into the NAR RPAC Hall of Fame, representing a minimum of $25,000 investment in the Realtor Political Action Committee. One of JT's favorite sayings is, do what you love in the service of people who love what you do. Let's give a warm Inside the Realtor Studio welcome to JT Just Terrific Tsighis.
Thank you, Steve. Hey, you know, I couldn't have done a better job of writing that myself.
I don't think so, no.
Thank you. That's a hell of an introduction, and it's good to be with you. And first of all, I want to thank you for this very creative, innovative idea to take the time this year, especially during the 100-year centennial, for you to interview past president. What a wonderful thing to do. And I, for one, appreciate it and congratulate you for the idea.
Thank you. And it's been a lot of fun to do. I've learned a lot while I've been talking to everybody. And I'm only about, let's see, just a little past a third of the way through all of our past presidents. So,
well, we have until April 27th, don't we? That's when the actual 100-year begins, or ends, I should say.
I think April 27th, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, let's begin our voyage with a bit about real estate before you were president. What brought you to Tucson? Where did you hail from?
How much time do we have, Steve? Well, basically, I'll make a long story short. Before I came to Tucson in 1972, I was a regional supervisor and a divisional vice president for a large restaurant company in New York City. And I had the distinction of running close to 25 restaurants, including haute cuisine and fast food operations. And one of my real favorite restaurants, which has recently closed, was the Four Seasons restaurant in the Seagram's building. Yeah. So my training was in hotel and restaurant management. I'm a Cornell graduate of the School of Hotel and Restaurant Management and graduated in 1960. So 12 years prior to coming to Tucson, hospitality was my major concern.
And is that what brought you to Tucson
Basically, yes, because
Okay.
one of my clients at one of the restaurants that he used to frequent, an attorney from New York, whom I shall remain nameless, bought the 11 Arches here in Tucson in 1971. And he bought the 52-acre estate, the Louise G. Grace estate, her summer home, up on Hacienda del Sol. It was 52 acres, and he bought it on a contract for sale for $300,000. Can you imagine? So he frequented my restaurants in New York, and he had bought this, and he invited me out. Long story short, I came out in 1972, did a pro forma on that specific property, and I said, you know, we could probably get anywhere between $15,000 to $25,000 an acre. That was then. You know the end of the story, that those lots up in Hacienda del Sol, going back, what, 15, 20 years ago, were selling for over $100,000 a piece. So
Sure.
that's what brought me here. And I decided to leave Restaurant Associates. They paid me for 6 months, Steve. Can you imagine?
Nice.
They paid me for 6 months, thinking that I had to get the restaurant business out of my system, because 24/7, if you know anything about the restaurant business, is exactly what you do. And so I decided to stay. I fell in love with the desert, and the rest is history. I joined a small little company called Sutton and Associates, and Rose Sutton was the broker. She was the broker that sold this attorney from New York the 11 Arches. So that's how that happened, way back in 1972. And that's when I was first licensed.
Okay. So when you got into real estate at that point, were you working on your own? Were you working with a partner or with a group?
No, I worked on my own. As a matter of fact, you know, I couldn't help but think way back when, you know, everybody seems to remember their first transaction. Well, I remember mine very vividly. And it took me 6 months before I actually get it, Steve. I bought my first vehicle then. I bought a 1972 Mustang convertible, because in New York, when you're living in New York, you don't have a car. You don't have a need for a car.
No, of course
So I
not.
bought my car, took a couple of months off, and then I got my first listing, which was a manufactured home listed for $8,000 on Drexel on the south side of Tucson. My commission, my net, after fees splitting with the broker, was $390.
But you were doing real estate.
I was doing real estate, is right. Anyway, I remember that well, and I stayed with Sutton and Associates until I branched out on my own. I bought a Red Carpet Tsighis and Associates, and that's when Red Carpet franchise and Century 21 franchises were very, very popular in the early, late, and middle of the 80s. And so I think we had close to maybe 18 or 19 different Red Carpet real estate offices at the time.
So when you started at that period, what was the technology of the day? What were you?
There was no technology.
No technology. One-page contract or bigger, or?
No, it was a one-page contract, right? Front and back. As a matter of fact, what's interesting is that I kept one of the homes illustrated going back to 1977, which was 2 years before. And I have that as a prop that I want to show you. I don't know how good it will show up here, but anyway, this is the Homes Illustrated. And this goes back to October 22nd, 1977.
Wow.
And I only had about, at the time when I first opened Red Carpet Tsighis and Associates, we had about 14 to 15 agents. And as the years passed by and we were confronted with some real challenges in the economy, we went down to as low as 8 people. And I even have a copy of an ad that I ran because most of the people couldn't pronounce my name, my last name, Tsighis.
Uh-huh.
So I made sure, and I don't know if you remember this or if any other presidents told you this, but we used to meet at MLS at the Black Angus on Broadway, and
Yes.
I think it was Craycroft. And because people were unable to pronounce my last name, I thought I'd do a little marketing stint and let them associate me and my brokerage firm with my number. So it was 888-3800. And to this day, if you know Harvey Motka,
Uh-huh.
Harvey only knows me by 888-3800. So obviously it penetrated real well. Anyway, I'm looking for the ad. I'll find it later.
Now, I can only think of 2 other people that I know that are in the industry to this day that also worked at Red Carpet Time, I think at the time. And that was Chris Patterson. And the other one is Debbie Goodman Butler. Both
Yes.
worked at Red Carpet.
That's right. That they were with Millstone Real Estate,
Okay.
Red Carpet Millstone. And I think they had an office on either Swan or Craycroft at the time.
Okay.
And Debbie's been with Long now for a long time, has she not?
Oh yeah, still to this day.
You know, there's an interesting story about Debbie, and I'm sure she'll tell you about this. But because I was a big shot broker then, at least I thought so. We would go on tours. Remember the tours we used to have with the caravans and the buses and the 10, 12 passenger vehicles.
Wow.
We'd go on tour. And I remember going to one of Debbie's open houses that she was trying to market. And I told her something about the pricing. And to this day, she has not forgotten my conversation because I came down pretty hard on her.
Oh.
Anyway, it's an interesting story. Anyway, here's the ad, if you can see it.
Oh, wow. That you can see.
Yeah. It was my first, Steve, it was my first centerfold.
All right. Well, let's shift over now to your presidency. You were in office in 1979. What was the building we were operating out of at that point in time?
You know, I have some faint memories of that, but I know the address was 651 North Swan. And it was
Okay.
a small, I think there's an attorney that resides in that location right now, Steve.
Yeah.
And I don't remember it that well, but it was kind of chopped up, small little rooms. And I think even at the time, not only did the CEO have an office, but the president at the time had an office at that location. And before that, we had, I guess in the early 70s, 72, 73, 74, and 75, I remember an office that we had just west of Campbell on Broadway at a second level up. And I don't have very good memories of that one because I didn't spend very much time there. But the one on 651 North Swan was where I spent most of my time.
All right. Well, I might be able to. I have two older presidents, or their years in office were before you, who are going to also be on here. So maybe I'll find out about that address at that point.
Broadway address.
Yeah, exactly. Who was you mentioned your CEO? Do you remember his name or his or her name?
Bob Spears.
Oh, okay.
Bob Spears. And you know, an interesting thing about Bob, he was pretty rough around the edges, but he had, and this is where my background in hotel management came out. He really had a taste for gourmet foods. And what I didn't tell you is that the gentleman that brought me to Tucson to take a look at Hacienda del Sol was the first person I ever sued. Because yeah, at the time, Steve, this is an interesting story. He, like I said, he bought the 11 Arches on a contract for sale.
Right.
And every 3 months he had to make a payment. And he would go to friends and borrow that payment and offer them 10% on their money within 30 days. Well, I loaned him my $6,000 and in hopes to get 10% of my money at the time. Well,
Sure.
$600 in 10 days in those days was a lot of money. Well, it just so happened he never paid up. So I was probably the last friend he had because he couldn't go to any other friend to pick up $6,000 to pay me mine plus interest. And so guess what? He was the first guy I sued, and the attorney I used was Mike Monroe.
Oh, okay.
And Mike Monroe turned out to be someone Bob Spears knew and who I believe we hired in 1979.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So that's my recollection of it. But getting back to Bob, when Bob retired, because he had this affinity to gourmet type living and foods, I gave him as his retirement gift, and I'm going to show you this. I bought it as a prop. I don't know if you can fully see it, but this is a champagne flute that was from the Four Seasons. I gave him a dozen of these things, Steve.
Wow.
And right now, this fluted glass from the Four Seasons, along with this brandy snifter, and you notice it's bottomless.
Yeah.
And you just cup it like this, and this is exactly how you warm the brandy. Anyway, those two items were so unique in 1959 that they appeared in the Museum of Modern Art.
Huh.
And so I gave Bob, because of his, like I said, desire for gourmet foods and fine living, I have no idea what the hell happened to them, but these things are pretty expensive right now.
So let me ask you, how did you get involved in association leadership?
Well, I knew very little about real estate when I came to Tucson in '72. And the one thing I wanted to do was to immerse myself in everything organized real estate had to offer. And so in those days, if you wanted to be president, and I never had that as a goal, but I got interested in being an officer, and you had to be a secretary or a treasurer, then vice president, and then president-elect, and then president. So that's how I pretty much got involved in my presidency at the time. And from there, I a proponent of wanting to distinguish myself from others because of the code of ethics, and because there were so many people at the time. I think we had only about 2,700 people in our association in 1979.
That's a lot, though.
Yeah, but it was dwindling, and it started to dwindle fast because then we had an interest rate of about 11.89 or 12%. And Steve, I have to tell you, it only got worse. And one of my biggest challenges at the time was to maintain that membership of close to 2,700. That was a big challenge. And in 1979, if the interest rate was 12%, the following year, the following 2 and 3 years, it went to 12%, 15%, 19%. And if you stop to look at the numbers, if you look at a $200,000 loan, which is not uncommon today, at 2.5%, you're talking about a P&I of maybe 800. You do that at 12% and you're over 2,000.
Yeah.
You do it at 19% and you're over 3,100. So how the hell did we sell properties back in those days? Because that's what VA and FHA were.
Sure.
In the early 80s, 81, 82. So this was a precursor to that. And I'll tell you one other interesting story. When you're president of an association, of course, the news media likes to tap into your knowledge about the MLS and the numbers, et cetera. And I remember being quoted in the Star and Citizen at the time that we would never see interest rates below double digits. And it was one prognostication that I'm sorry I ever made. But at the time, subsequent to 79, 80, 81, 82, 83, 84, I was right on. But look at where we are today at 2.5, 2.75, 2.875. It's just incredible where we are. And I think that's probably why properties are so much in demand right now. We had a struggle back then.
And I bought my first house in 1980. So I understand what
Did you
those,
really?
and we couldn't afford to do it conventionally. So we did it, this was in Michigan, we did it by way of doing a land contract at
I remember.
10% for an unheard of 10 years.
Oh my God.
And we used all 10 of those years and sold it in the 10th year at that point for double what we had paid for it. So, but we couldn't have
That's a good
afforded
story.
to do it. Yeah, because yeah, they were 15 or 17%, I think, at that point in time in 1980.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So let me ask you, so in the leadership and you decided to do that to set yourself apart, did you have anybody that was pushing you or dragging you into association leadership at all?
No, but I guess there was one individual at the time whose reputation I was attracted to,
Okay.
and that was Bud Crones. Bud Crones was the first treasurer to the National Association of Realtors back in the 70s from Tucson. And I was pretty much in awe knowing that someone from Tucson could
Yeah.
be the treasurer for the National Association of Realtors. And quite frankly, Bud Crones was the guy that installed me in 1979 when I became president.
Nice.
So he's the one that pretty much motivated me to aspire to do greater and more things with organized real estate. And I don't think I've ever given him the credit for that. But
You just did.
yeah, I did. Yeah, you're right. But
Did you
at the time when he was living.
did you have any other mentors that you looked up to, or?
Not really. I think Bud probably is the one that really stood out for me.
So dwindling membership was your biggest challenge during your presidency. What was your biggest accomplishment?
I would say in retrospect, probably making sure that our CEO, Bob Spear, and I hired Mike Monroe. That
Oh,
was a beginning of having a resource for a legal review of a lot of the things that we were planning on doing. I remember at the time, and this has been ongoing forever, it seems, in my presidency, we were fighting a tax on professional fees. And we were fighting a tax on transfer of properties. And so those two things, and ultimately, based on the input and the efforts of presidents that followed me, we changed a lot of that with constitutional amendments. I'm sure you'll have some fun interviewing those presidents that will take responsibility for a constitutional amendment in the state of Arizona when it came to transfer fees and professional fees. So
you
anyway,
mentioned
that
in
was
your
probably one of the biggest obstacles, and then trying to maintain membership.
we mentioned in your introduction about your involvement with both AAR and NAR. What happened first? Which way did you go, and what committees did you get involved with?
Well, I've always had a passion for risk management. And way back when, it was a different name at the time. It was a KRA, a key results area for AAR.
Okay.
And so I really participated in risk management, having owned my own company, and then being a branch manager. I was a branch manager for Merrill Lynch when they had 3 offices in town. And when Merrill Lynch sold out and they became Prudential, I was a branch manager then. And then took a small 2-year stint in California for a company called First Team. And
Yeah.
so I pretty much moved around, came back, and that's when Judy Lowe hired me to be a branch manager for Coldwell Banker.
All right.
And then from Coldwell Banker, I became her designated broker for realty executives. So all the time being very much involved with the state association, whether it was a strategic planning session, a government affairs meeting, or committee. Those were where I had a lot of my time expended in organized real estate.
So you've had you've done a lot of mentorships yourself with people who are up and coming and who have gotten involved with leadership. What's your best bit of advice for those who are looking at the possibility of becoming leaders themselves?
Well, that's a very good question. I think to get involved and start with the basic committee of interest that is appealing to you, and give it your all. Make sure you just don't want to create a CRV or a resume of a lot of things you did without really learning something along the way. I guess immersing yourself in committee work where you can actually see results and where you can grow as a person and where you can help the association grow while you're growing. I think that's a key thing. And without the expectation that someday you're going to be rewarded. I think if you're going to go into anything, you're going to have to do it, number one, because you have a passion for making it better. And if you can make it better, then you can leave with a sense of accomplishment. And so my message to anyone thinking of leadership, just get involved, learn all you can, give of yourself while you're in that position, and don't expect anything in return. And that's pretty much the way I've looked at things, and was able to receive these awards totally unexpected along the way. So and I think a lot like you too, Steve, you've gotten involved and you've given of yourself 100%, and you're still giving. And here it is. I've been a realtor since 1972. It's going to be what, 49 years. Next year, it'll be 50 years. And I have never backed away from my involvement, whether it was TAR, AAR, or NAR. And I think that's what you have to do. I love the realtors. I love what they stand for. I love the things that they've accomplished. Distinguishing ourselves with the code of ethics was paramount to me, because you hear all these kinds of stories of the licensees that don't have those moral codes to follow. So basically, that would be my advice.
All right. Well, any other thoughts about your term in office?
As president? No. I do want to mention this, though. Back in the day, in 79, 80, 81, that's when the state association used to go out of state, Steve. I believe I received my Realtor of the Year in 1979 for AAR and TAR in Acapulco, Mexico.
Nice.
Yeah. And we traveled, I mean, even then when I was getting my designations, because that was the only thing I had a thirst for knowledge. If I were going to sit down with a client, I wanted to make sure that my client knew that I had gone through the trouble of educating myself and getting my designations, the GRI, the CRS. I was a charter member in 79, the CRB, only so this education that I would be experiencing would now be able to be experienced as the best possible service I could give my client. So that was the thinking then. I wanted to make a real clean distinction between myself and someone who hadn't made an effort, because everything I had exposed to ultimately should benefit the client I was about to serve. So, I mean, that's been my approach ever since. So, yeah, I've enjoyed it. And, I have no regrets looking back to 1979 or 1972. The saying that I have, do what you love in the service of people who love what you do is a beautiful thing for me, because here I am. I'll be 84 this year, Steve. And the beautiful thing about being in real estate is that you can stay in it for as long as you want. And you can sell, you can list, you can coach, you can mentor, you can give referrals. It's just a wonderful thing. And I'm not so sure I would have had that same experience if I stayed in the restaurant business in New York. I may not have even been alive right now, knowing what has transpired in New York City and other cities.
Yeah.
So with the restaurant business. So anyway, that's pretty much my story.
Okay, well, at the end of our interview, we do 7 quick questions and we're looking for 7 quick answers. So I'll begin with, what's your favorite word?
Love.
What's your least favorite word?
I can't mention it.
You're the second one today. What turns you on?
What turns me on? I love music of all kinds. And I have to tell you, music is just an international language to me. And whenever I need solace or a moment of reflection, I've kind of let myself get absorbed in music. And it can be any kind of music. It doesn't have to be the opera or the classics. It could be just a wonderful melody of some kind. It's just a very calming and emotional impact on me.
Well, music turns you on. What turns you off?
Lying.
Okay.
I have a very, very low tolerance for people that lie. And I've been like that all my life. And I don't know where it came from, but it certainly is there. I'm one for trust, truth, and transparency. And I even, looking back at 79 when I was president, I had a different style at the time. And people were somewhat offended by my democratic style because they were looking more for an authoritative style. That's not who I am. I seek out the input, the intelligence of those people around me, and then make my decisions. So.
And what profession other than real estate would you have liked to have attempted? And I'd say other than restaurant as well.
I would have loved to have been a singer.
Oh, nice.
But I don't have the voice for it. Well, it kind of ties in with music because I did play a musical instrument. I even had a band when I was in high school. I played the clarinet, sax, alto sax, and
Wow.
I had a band in high school called the Half Beats, Steve. It was fun. So music has been a part of me, and I still to this day love it.
Is there a profession out there that you're super glad you didn't attempt?
At one time I thought of going to law school and being an attorney, but I'm happier with the choice that I made as a realtor.
Yeah.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I had 2 years of liberal arts at Adelphi College preparing for pre-law. And oh, by the way, what I didn't tell you is that I'm also a son of an immigrant. I'm the firstborn of some. My dad came from Greece. My mother came from Athens. And I always wanted to go to an Ivy League school, but didn't have the money to do it. Neither did my parents. So I managed to get scholarships that I applied for. And the first scholarship I ever had, Steve, was with the Franklin National Bank on Long Island, where I was living in Nassau County. And I got paid $40 a week. And, I always marveled at listening to my grandparent, who used to give me all kinds of stories of how much money a loaf of bread was and all that nonsense. But I did actually work for $1 an hour, $40, and $32 went to pay for my education. And I got an $8 check during the summer from the Franklin National Bank. And then I moved on to get a scholarship from the St. Moritz Hotel in New York. And they were offering scholarships to Cornell University. And in my yearbook, that was one thing that I always wanted and had aspired to do, was to go to Cornell. I applied for this scholarship from the St. Moritz Hotel in New York. They were giving it to boys of Greek descent at the time. And so I applied and I got it. And I got 3 years of my education at Cornell University paid for me. Of course, I had to pay for room and board. And I worked throughout my entire 3 years there, but I did get my Bachelor of Science in Hotel and Restaurant Administration then. So,
Wonderful.
yeah.
And in closing, if you could do a shout out to anyone, living or not, in the real estate community, who would it be and why?
That's a very good question. I've been surrounded by so many good quality people that there's no one single person other than the individual I mentioned earlier with Bud Crohn's. But I've been surrounded with so many wonderful people, from Sherry Schnebley and Christine Sanchez and a number of others who had worked diligently. You know, they spend 12, 15, maybe 20 years in that same position. We go in 1 year as president and out the other, and maybe they have to acclimate themselves to new presidents. But I think in all, it's the staff along the way for the past 41 years that I would acknowledge as being the people that I would most cherish and see of value.
JT, this ends our interview at this point, and I just want to say thank you so much. You have been mentioned multiple times in our other interviews by many of our other presidents who all appreciate what you've been able to dedicate and do for the real estate community. So I just want to say thank you for being here today and participating in this. Any last thoughts?
Yes, thank you, Steve, for doing this for all of us. I think that's very noble. And another aspect of the great guy that you are and the efforts that you've made for TAR, AAR, and NAR. So a lot is to be said about you, and I thank you for that. And thanks for the opportunity. I've enjoyed doing it.
Wonderful. Thank you.